There has been a massive flurry of activity, especially regarding Brexit. Not only last week, but this week as well. It's looking quite interesting because there is potentially, as MPs now have risen for their parliamentary recess, a lot of MPs are going to be feeling quite hot under the collar, and that's not just the warm weather that is doing that. That is going to be the fact that Brexit is coming on them fast, very fast, and as more and more we find out, we are just not prepared in any way, shape or form, let alone the fact that is this really what the public actually voted for in 2016 is now coming bizarrely into an accurate question, which is what we've been saying from the very beginning. However, the fact that people like Ian Duncan Smith are almost validating the fact that we were saying this years ago. Who knew that a Brexiteer could be so useful at this time? So, we're going to cover a blog by Chris Gray, who's a university professor down in London. It's the Brexit blog. It's a very good blog. I definitely recommend you go and check it out. So, the Brexit screw tightens. Almost since the day of the referendum, the Brexit process has gone around in circles, with the same issues resurfacing and the same contradictions and paradoxes reoccurring. That continues to be the case, but the receptions can be misleading in two ways. The one with the each rerun of somehow new evidence re-emerging to reinforce the underlying issue or contradiction. The other is at the end of the transition period gets closer, each iteration of the cycle makes the matter even more urgent. In the past, I've used the metaphor of the Mobius strip to capture these repetitions, but perhaps a better image is that of a thread being screwed inexorably tighter. This week have seen several such examples. Free ports have for years been touted as a benefit of Brexit and became government policy when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, with a consultation exercise launched last February. I discussed this issue at that time and won't repeat that analysis here, except to say that it pointed to be very mixed evidence for their benefit, and even in their non-EU form. Last week, we saw another outing of an argument of their virtues, but that very same day, new research from the UK Trade Policy Observatory showed that these to be almost non-existent. If it is to be a major component of post-transition trade and industrial policy, it is completely misplaced. If free ports will not provide an economic boost, the dangers of Brexit to the economy and strategically vital chemical industries were again laid bare. In the latest series of excellent reports by Peter Foster on the practicalities of Brexit, the industry in the UK's second largest manufacturing sector and in its trade and supply chains are massively tied to the EU. These dangers have become even more important because of the decision to leave the European Chemicals Agency and the REACH regulations. It oversees Sorry about that. Phone just had a bit of a meltdown. The regulations overseas, but under Theresa May, there had been a plan to seek some sort of associate membership. That might or might not have succeeded. A House of Lords report in 2018, which also set out clear details for both being in those regulations, and the issue was a lot less doubtful. Under Johnson, there's been an even more hardline approach. A complete regulatory independence is now the policy. This is going to be hugely costly, about $1 billion according to the Foster report. The bureaucracy is cumbersome, however it is done, and the more so if no agreement is reached with the EU on accessing the ECA data, which is doubtful. In short, no one yet knows how it is going to work or whether it will be ready in time for the end of the transition, and that is less than 5 months away. But the real kicker, even if it all goes ahead, what in effect will it happen? And in a very large extent a replication of existing regulatory regime with the sole advantage of it being badged British. Indeed, it is an example of one of the many things that the UK's budget contribution was paying for. Though not included the crude accountings that dominated the referendum campaign, its replication is also an example of how, in practice, Brexit Britain will be pulled by the gravitational force of EU regulation because reach is so increasingly a global standard. This is purely theoretical sovereignty, which is being regained. But the costs to business, trade, and jobs are real. They will be the price. It is a paradigm, a case of what Brexit is going to mean in practice, as has always been clear since August of 2017, back when we all knew about Brexit, what that meant and what it means, and how the provisions of the then Data Protection Bill were outlined. We have also seen updates on the objections of Kent residents to the new Brexit lorry parks, plus the new Operation Brock is to be revealed at the end of the transition period. As for Holyhead, goodness knows how its problems will be dealt with. New warnings of food shortages in Northern Ireland because of the Irish Sea border, new warnings of environmental governance gap in the end of the transition period. The revival of government plans for stockpiling medicines in preparations for possible disruptions. A new CIB survey showing that businesses concerned about the lack of preparedness for the end of the transition period. And the latest culture war volley in the elevation of prominent Brexiteers to the House of Lords. Forgotten now, now it is the Brexiteers' insistence that it is crucial that our laws be made by those people who can vote, who we can vote out of office. As was the list of some of last week's developments. In last week's post, the sheer diversity of complex problems is completely striking. As for the latest good news about Brexit, that's easily dealt with. There is none. Some might propose that the imminent trade deal with Japan is an exception, but although we don't yet know the detail, it isn't likely to be strikingly different to the EU-Japan deal that UK is currently a part of. It's certainly true that not doing such a deal would have been damaging, but that just means that this story is not bad news rather than it just being good news, despite the jubilance of the Brexiteer press, of which we will and have more agreements is signed and noted that the deal is at, quote, the Japanese insistence over a speedy renegotiation rather than a rollover, to which Japan would not agree. It is also possible, as mentioned in a recent post, that if, when, and the UK do reach a trade deal agreement, that a further, more extensive deal with Japan might follow. Similarly, we really meant to welcome today's news that the 350 million is to be spent on a new support systems and processes for trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That may be helpful to Northern Ireland businesses, although there are many questions as to how and whether it will work. As what it was offering to offset the damage of a natural disaster, it might be the sense of a welcome. But Brexit is self-inflicted, and all that along with it was denied this and that or any damage would actually occur. So if good news means something unequivocally, good is that it has happened as a result of Brexit, and which wouldn't have happened without Brexit, and we are still actually waiting for it. In the face of this, it might be expected in any rational policy that those who have championed Brexit and all its unallied advantages would now be starting to express some alarm about perhaps even some more of the contradictions of what they're planning. But wait, what they have actually fostered on us, and in what way they are, but it is in the way that is neither rational nor even moral nor honest. Witness how this week we have seen the veteran arch-Brexiteer himself, Ian Duncan Smith, bemoaning the financial commitments signed up to in the withdrawal agreement. It is a story of multiple layers of complete absurdity and dysfunctionality. His complaints are that, in the fine print, unnoticeable by many, of the withdrawal agreement is 160 billion for EU loans, but this is the withdrawal agreement, which was Johnson's great oven-ready deal that was presented to the voters at 2019 election, and afterwards Duncan Smith enthusiastically voted for it in the House of Commons. That vote on the withdrawal agreement bill was rushed through, but he did join the calls for more scrutiny of the fine print. Absolutely not. On the contrary, he said, If there is anything about this agreement that we have not known in the debate and thrashed to death, I would love to know what it is. So he fully supported it, but didn't apparently understand its implications, which was part of his job to scrutinise, and now he objects and argues against further scrutiny. But the final ridiculous twist, the 160 billion story, isn't really true anyway. It's based on the effective zero possibility of every loan made by the European Investment Bank being defaulted on simultaneously. And it's easy, almost obligatory, to mock this depressing fantango of stupidity and lies, but to do so messes with the deeper significance of which is twofold. The first is the latest salvo in the Brexit ultras' attempt to disown the entirety of the withdrawal agreement. In a post immediately after the 2019 election, I flagged up the likelihood that they would do this, and I have since recorded how it is becoming a growing concerted campaign which carries profound dangers of international pariahdom. It will intensify through the autumn and reach a crescendo if there is no trade deal. Secondly, and more broadly, is that the latest indication that the truly tragic fate that Brexiteers have inflicted on Britain, whereby they insist that Brexit must be done or else the will of the people is betrayed, but also insist that any actual way that Brexit is done is a betrayal of the will of the people. It is a paradox from which there is no escape, which dooms us to years of possibly decades of culture war. One effect of a culture war is to produce refugees, and again it's been obvious from the beginning that Britain would suffer an exodus of people alienated by Brexit. Most obviously, that means EU nationals in the UK, who for both reasons, and particularly uncertainly and culturally affronted, are no longer wish to be here. It also means that UK nationals, and again for both economic and cultural reasons, those who see Britain headed for economic danger, but those also who feel exiled by Brexit. Inevitably, those most likely to leave are those with the skills to do so, and easily. Anecdotally, including from my own experience, this has been underway since 2016, but this week saw the first hard evidence of brain drain as regards to UK nationals moving to the EU. Though it is only still partial, we will be a while before we know its full effect, which will also be on emigration to non-EU countries. It can also be expected that rates of UK emigration to the EU are now peaking, as after the transition period, freedom of movement and associated rights will cease. That this is a brain drain, a term that we have only rarely heard in the UK since the 1970s, though in June 2017 I also warned of this prospect, it is significant because it indicates that this is another economic cost of Brexit, but also reflects the crucial underlying issues in the demographics of the Brexit vote, in which both the post-compulsory education and being economically active associating with voting remain, whilst the converse was true for Leave voters. The consequence of this has become the new unsoluble in the political correctness of Brexit. It means those who actually have to deal with the practical consequences of Brexit do not greatly overlap with those who chose it. That cannot be condescending to make that, since Brexiteers themselves constantly say that the Remainers are the elite, and what does an elite do other than run things? Of course, they aren't for the most part bureaucrats, tycoons, or even big business leaders, all of whom by definition aren't very numerous. Rather, they are the private and public sector managers, the professionals, the scientists, the entrepreneurs, the academics, the game designers, the tech workers, and the musicians, and so on. In the main, they aren't high-born. Most probably have working class parents. Many may even consider themselves to be working class, nor are they necessarily well paid. What Brexit has done is spit in their faces, not so much because of the referendum result, but because of the winner-takes-all refusal to enact a compromised form to reflect the narrow result. And anything more, because of the constant insults since the vote, they are now open game for every taunt. They have been told that every day for 4 years that they are metropolitan elites. in the pay of the EU exploiters, of the Bulgarian nannies or the Polish plumbers, the crybabies, the saboteurs, the traitors, and the enemies of the people. And constantly, they are told if they love the EU so much, then they should go and live there. So it's not particularly surprising that they are doing just that. And if they can, or it seems to be happening with the civil service, resigning rather than be used as political punching bags. It used to be a cliche that any history exam paper question on any period about any country could gain marks by referencing the rising middle class. Brexit has in effect declared a culture war on Britain's middle class, or at least the most productive. The active parts of it is which is leading skilled people to leave or to withdraw from public life. Yet, at the same time, it is they who are charged with actually dealing with Brexit, because of course most of them are not in a position to emigrate or resign. For it is not the archetypal Brexit voting coastal town pensioner who thinks that immigration has gone too far and is fed up with being told what to do by Brussels, but just wants his country back, and who is managing social care provision for his peers. It is again archetypal, shall we say, Remain voting granddaughter with a social sciences degree who works in local government and is desperate as she can no longer recruit EU workers and has hopes of further study in the Netherlands dashed by a relationship with her Dutch boyfriend are completely jeopardised. The horrible achievement of the Brexiteers has been to confine the grandfather as an ordinary, decent person who has taken revenge on his Ramona elitist granddaughter. But setting up that bogus but vicious cultural conflict, Brexiteers have potentially set a train of something much more dangerous in motion. It is obvious to anyone paying attention that we are in the start of an unemployment bloodbath, with daily new redundancy announcements because of the COVID-19, and is going to be exacerbated by Brexit, especially when the transition period ends. Traditionally, the social liberal middle classes were happy, or, if not happy, felt moral obligation to support through taxes and unemployment as this kind of implicit social contract. I'm not so sure that will be true anymore for those who, whilst not able to join the brain drain, now feel like exiles in their own country. Whether some adverse effect of Brexit is reported, social media posts immediately focus on who voted for it. So, for example, the current stories about the Kent lorry parks in a country where the majority voted for Brexit are not viewed sympathetically. Stories about the concerns of Sunderland or Cornwall about the effects of Brexit get similar treatment. The response is invariably to point out, often gleefully, the majority of those areas voted for Brexit, so they must accept the consequences. I don't defend those statements. Leave voters were misled, and worse, by a referendum campaign and years of media poison. And anyway, the adverse effects of Brexit are not going to smartly target Leave voters, but spare the Remainers. Moreover, whilst Remainers certainly have no obligation to get behind Brexit, they need to make their own contribution to prolonging the culture war. And in any case, it could be crucially moralistic. Would it? Oh, there we go. Would it all got pushed? Would we all got punished for every mistake we made? But defensively or not, those responses are real and can be read every day. Perhaps they are not most widely shared and represent another vocal slither of a Remainer opinion. But these sentiments are more extensively held, as I suspect they are. This means the economic inactivity and the low-skilled demographic and the left-behind regions that voted for Brexit will no longer be seen by the liberal middle class as deserving of support. It will be said that they have got what they voted for and they will have to live with it. That, after all, is a logical consequence of the Brexiteers' elitist narrative. They chose to say that Leave voters were the people and the Remain voters weren't. They inflicted Britain with this culture war as a tactic to win the referendum. So harsh as such a Remainer vengefulness may be, but it does grow from the soil cultivated by leading Brexiteers. For that matter, the first part of my critique above of this vengefulness is what Brexiteers insist to be the elitist condemnation of the dying that Leave voters knew that they knew what they were voting for. As I said in a tweet, which by modest standards went viral this week, the proposition that voters in 2016, when Brexit had no detailed or set definition, knew exactly what they were voting for, hardly sits easy with Duncan Smith's claim that, equipped with the detailed withdrawal agreement in 2019, he didn't understand what he was voting for. And that, ladies and gentlemen, sums it up. A guy who has claimed for years that people knew what they were voting for. They knew what Brexit was about, and yet he voted for something and now says he didn't understand what he was voting for. It's almost like in democracy, you are allowed to change your mind. And you are allowed to have another vote on things. That's how democracy works. But there you go. So anyway, we'll see you all next time. Please do remember to like, share and subscribe, and share this video around. And there are links below should you like to support this channel in another way. So thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.